Welcome to the podcast designed to fuel your success in selling technology solutions. I'm your host, Josh Lopresto, SVP of Sales Engineering at Telarus, and this is Next Level Biz Tech. Everybody, welcome back to another episode. Today we are kicking off the IoT Revolution. More importantly, we're talking about meeting the innovators shaping tomorrow's world. On with us, we have got the wonderful Mr. Graeme Scott, VP of Mobility and Advanced Networking at Telarus. Graeme, welcome on, man.
Thank you, Josh. Appreciate it. Long-time listener, first-time caller, as the saying goes. So, I've listened to many of these podcasts and a big fan. So actually really excited to be on.
Love it, man. Love it. Appreciate it. Let's talk about this here. First of all, let's get to know you. For anybody that has been under a rock and has no idea who you are, give us a little bit of focus, some of your history, and then really what your role now here is at Telarus.
Sure, yeah. So I think most people have heard I'm Canadian. So I was born and raised in the great country up north there. Calgary, Alberta was my home, and went to school there. And then started my career, went to the University of Calgary, which is the college up there. Go Dinos, right?
Yes.
Dinos, not like T-Rex or whatever, just generic dinos. Like, don't want to offend any others. But so had a career in actually investment banking is what I thought I wanted to do coming out of college. And just turned out it wasn't for me, right? I mean, who wants to make millions of dollars in finance? So I quit that and ended up working on cruise ships for a couple of years. So I think most people know that I was a cruise director in a previous life, and that's where I met my lovely wife. And the two of us then moved to the US together, where I started my career in telecom with Comcast as an outside sales rep. So it's kind of funny how you go from finance to selling cable door to door, but I always joke that my first commission sales job was on cruise ships because I got a cut of the bingo gate. So
Yes.
The more people that I would bring into the venue and the more tickets we'd sell, the more money I would get. So turned out I was pretty good at selling bingo at least. And so I became came here and said, well, let's take a run at sales. And Comcast was the place that I was fortunate enough to land and never looked back. I mean, telecom, I was right there at the beginning of the cable revolution, which I think was very impactful for anybody in our industry, and happy to ride that wave to Charter, where I became part of the channel, and then that eventually transitioned to Spectrum, and then Viasat, where I worked with a great team over there to help build the program. And then when moved over to TCG, which was, of course, acquired by Telarus, and that has led me here. So very excited to be part of the team here, and loving the new role.
Love it. I love a good windy path. I don't know that we've had a former cruise director on the show, so this from Canada. So this is exciting, and there is a good clip of Canadian listeners as we see on the Spotify data. So thank you for all our Canadian friends out there. Let's talk about, I want to hear about like a lesson learned in this, right? You've had an interesting past, you've had mentors, you've had lessons learned the easy way, the hard way, but I'd love to bring those to the show. So maybe just give us a valuable lesson you've learned, like I said, from a mentor, a mistake made, or anything you got we can use against you as blackmail later.
Yeah, this is, as a sales guy, young sales guy, and I should preface, I did have a little small sales role when I was in Canada working for a company as a distributor. Ironically, we sold non-perishables. So we would sell, like if you went to a grocery store and bought a steak, we would sell the styrofoam tray, the soaker pad, the wrap, and the label, like all that stuff. So I was a young sales guy just learning my chops, and my sales manager, I landed a real big account, what I thought. I'd been working this guy for a while. We had a great conversation, had a real good rapport, and it was going to be a big deal, really good sized deal. And so I wanted to bring my sales manager along for the close. And again, I'd been courting this guy for several months, and finally we got down to and brought my sales manager along for the close, went through the whole proposal, did the whole thing. And the guy turned to me and he goes, well, this looks really great. Let me just run it by Leo and let you know what he says. And I was like, what? Like, who's Leo? Right. And so it kind of the lesson that taught me, I came out of there and had to eat crow with my sales manager. I remember he didn't say anything to me. He just turned to me and he goes, Graeme, who the expletive is Leo? And I will never forget that because it always is like, hey, in sales, if you're not talking to the decision maker, right, you got to make sure you're talking to the right people. And I think that is a lesson that I learned the hard way there. We did end up getting that account. Leo was turned out to be a pretty good guy, but it pushed us out another, month or so. So, anyways, that's definitely a lesson learned, and I will never forget. Always find out who's Leo.
Love it. All right, great. All right. So we're talking about IoT, this IoT revolution, innovation of tomorrow. Look, IoT itself, we know it's been around for a while, right? But as it's become productized, it's become more mainstream, it's come into the channel. What do you think are some of these recent catalysts that have created such an opportunity for partners, and what is that?
Well, I think, business has always demanded information, right? Data. And, when businesses make decision, they want to make sure that they have the right information to make that decision upon. And all that is data, right? They're pulling data from various facets of the organization, finance, operations, logistics, you name it, whatever it is. And all that data comes together to create, you know, a yes or no or some type of decision. And I think decisions have become more complicated with technology and costs are higher. So businesses are really, really focused on making sure they have the right information before they make those decisions. And a lot of that's where IoT is coming in from, right? Bringing in information, bringing in data from the field and putting that into some kind of usable form that businesses can use to make decisions. And those decisions can be operational decisions, they can be financial decisions, investment decisions, you name it. But business is driven by information. And I think what's really spurned this uptick in IoT is this demand for information and more of it. And the other thing that I think is obvious to most people, if you're looking at IoT and why it's seen such a spike of late, is AI, right? I mean, and the capabilities now to take all of that data and turn it into something usable has just increased tremendously, right? We were always somewhat limited by humans' capacity to ingest and work through all that data. Well, now AI has made those capabilities so much more. And we talked about it on one of our AI modules we did when I sat down with Jason Lowe. But I think that is really what's driving, especially this recent spike in AI interest, or IoT interest, is AI.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. I mean, it seems like there's what businesses did before, but then there's also what businesses of a certain size did before. And when you grow to a certain size, you have to make decisions differently, right? And you can't go, well, I feel like we should do this. I think this is that. That doesn't work after a
Right.
while. And I think to your point too, you now bolt on what the expectation is out of, okay, we've got all these analog inputs, or we've got all of this data, or we've got to make a key decision. It's got to be data driven. Yeah. So you bring up some killer points in that.
Yeah, purchasing a new piece of equipment, right? How do we tell when it's time? Like, what are the
Yeah.
benefits? Are we going to be able to track the ROI on that? I mean, you've got to be able to deliver those kind of metrics to the business in today's day and age. And I think that's a spot on, right? You can't just do it by feel anymore.
Yeah.
It's got to be data driven.
So if I'm a partner and I'm listening to this, maybe I haven't jumped into this mobility and IoT space yet, and I'm in a different technology area, and a customer of mine or a prospect of mine comes up to me to want to understand, hey, is mobility and IoT something that you can help me with? What do you want the partners to say in that? What do I'm a big questions guy. What do you believe that those responses immediately should be?
So I think the one thing that we as tech advisors or our partners need to understand is that mobility and IoT is within all of your customers, right? Especially mobility, if you think about that. I mean, every single one of them is using it. We know that there aren't many businesses out there that don't use cell phones, for example, or some type of mobile internet connection or something like that. It is such a prevalent technology now that I think we need to sort of get our head around the fact that it is present within every customer that you have. Okay. So because of that, it's going to be relevant to them, right? You're not asking them about something they're not using. You're asking them about something that they use every day. And I think because of that, there's some confidence there. So, that's the first step, right? Is knowing that when you ask a question about mobility or you ask a question about maybe even IoT, there's some relevance there. I think there was a statistic that I quote in my Ascend events, and you know what they say about statistics, right? 53.1% of all statistics are made up or something like that. But this one's a good one. It says 93% of executives believe that the risks of the benefits of IoT outweigh the risks. And I think what they're referring to is the benefits of that data. So combine the mobility aspect, right? We've got all of our customers we know are using it. And 93% of executives believe the benefits of IoT outweigh the risks. You know, you've got a pretty big audience there, right? You've got a lot of people that care a lot about those topics and so I think as a tech advisor, you can go to them with confidence, knowing that you're talking about something relevant and something that they care about. And I think that's a big deal.
Yeah. Yeah. I think 60% of the time that's right, 100% of the time. So I can't
Exactly.
see why you wouldn't want to talk about that.
Right.
Uh, let's talk about the challenges that a business faces, right? I loved in early sales training, I loved objection handling because we
Mhm.
knew ultimately, also fellow door-to-door salesman, we knew when we were schlepping these $2,500 vacuums that turns out people were going to object. They had a reason why they didn't want to spend that much money and put it on credit.
Right.
So let's talk about that though from an IoT perspective in implementing some of these solutions. So what are the problems that the businesses are facing, most common ones in trying to implement? Right? Is there a mismatch? Is there expectations and reality differences here?
Yeah, so I think you know, the IoT statistics, if you look at them, and again, statistics, but 93% of executives, right? So there's your big number there. But also somewhere between 50 to 60% of IoT projects fail,
Mm.
right? So that's a big number too. So there's always some concern there. So the objections are real. Now, the thing that we as tech advisors have to focus on is why those projects fail, right? And there's a key part of that statistic. It's when businesses try to go alone. Okay. And the three main reasons, based on most of the research that I've seen out there, is number one, a lack of alignment on goals. Okay. What are we trying to accomplish? If the business stakeholders don't agree on what we're trying to do and the value of that, then it doesn't really matter what we put in front of them because it's going to fail, right? People are going to disagree and there's going to be a lack of consensus. So what are we trying to accomplish and what is the value of that? If you've established that and you've got everybody on the same page, I think the rest tends to fall in place. So the other reasons that it fails is a lack of timeline issues, right? We want something too fast or we want something not fast enough or whatever. So there's a miscalculation on the timeline. And the third thing, which is good news for our tech advisors, is a lack of expertise, right? Internal expertise. They don't have the resources internally to take on an additional project, right? We all know how strained IT staffs are across the customers there. I know you talk about it on this podcast many times. And so you're asking those internal resources to do something that is not within their realm of expertise, in addition to their other functions. And so I think as tech advisors, when you look at, you know, something that is there, that's an opportunity for us to step in and provide some assistance through your own knowledge or even the relationships that we as Telarus offer you with our suppliers. So if you can help with those three things with your customers, you're turning that 50% success failure rate and bringing it way down. And I think that's where the value lies for us when we're having these conversations. That's a huge problem to solve.
Yeah, it's interesting. This one seems to come up on a lot of episodes. We talk about the talent shortage out there. I look at this question and kind of some of the answers that you just gave, and it's really freaking hard to be a customer. I think the reason this channel is thriving and has so much continued potential is because it is just getting harder and harder. I can't imagine being in the customer's shoes on this
Yeah.
stuff, right? I've got years ago, I already had my multi-million people talent shortage and security. Now I'm expected to have somebody bolt on an AI and large language model person and figure out how to build that. And they got to be experts on, sensors and mobility and cradle points and all of these things. I just think, there's such a great opportunity here. It's such a backlog of
Yeah.
talent shortage out there in everything.
For sure. And I think, you know, that's all good news for us, right? I mean, that's really where we can help plug in those gaps and fill that up. You know, one point I wanted to bring out about what I just said is is I talked about those three things, right? I talked about a lack of alignment on goals. I talked about timelines, and I talked about a lack of expertise. What didn't I talk about? Budget, right? Now, budget is number four, okay, but it's not in the top three. And I think that is significant, meaning that there is money for these types of projects within organizations. They will fund it if you can make the case. And I think that all draws back to number one. Do we have alignment on what we're trying to accomplish here? And is there value in that? Like, if we can clearly define, here's the goal of the project, here's what we want to get out of it, then I think, that money will be there. And I think that's also good news for our tech advisors.
Yeah, and isn't it funny too? I think early on in any technical learning training that I was doing, I didn't envision so much of it being about, okay, but what are we trying to accomplish? Like, let's back up. You're asking for this thing. Why or who's asking for it? And that just opens the door to everything. And to your point, I mean, yeah, if they might say in the beginning, I have no budget. Sorry, I can't do that. That's exciting, but well, tell me about some of the things that you're trying to accomplish. Well, we're trying to prevent, our trucks from speeding, or we're trying to prevent equipment from walking out the door that costs us 50 grand every pop. I mean, really basic stuff that sometimes I think customers go, there's probably nothing I can do here. It just opens up so many different business conversations, and
Yeah.
ultimately there's a way that we can help in that. There really isn't anything that we can't do to help them on a lot of these things. It's baffling to me, some of the areas that we can help in.
Right. And I think you raise another really good point with there, because a lot of times these projects don't live within the IT silo that we're used to dealing with, right? So the examples you gave there, which I think are great ones, were fleet tracking, right? So is that the IT person's responsibility? Probably not. That's probably going to sit with the logistics manager or perhaps a warehouse manager or something like that. One of the things that we're having a lot of success with in the IoT world is physical security, so cameras, and that is typically not an IT issue either. That is a facilities manager or security manager or something like that. So I think, another sort of wrinkle to this is a lot of times you're gonna have to get outside of that silo that you're used to dealing with in the IT department. These business problems, these issues are going on elsewhere in the organization. So, earlier you asked about questions, and I think there's some really important ones right there off that point is, what else is going on in the business? Like, what else are you guys doing? Where are you spending money? Do you even know how they make money? I think that's an important
Yeah.
question too, right? Like, I talk about that in my Ascend events. I mean, a lot of times we'll have a conversation with a partner and they'll say, hey, I'll say, well, what do they do? Well, they're in healthcare. Okay, well, what does that mean? I mean, that's a pretty wide range,
Yeah.
right? There's a lot of different aspects to healthcare. So how do they make money? And are we aware of that? So I think, stepping a little bit outside of the IT world and the IT silo is a challenge that a lot of our partners and tech advisors have. And, it's our goal to try and help them do that. And I think just simple questions, find out about the business, ask what's going on. What other initiatives are you guys doing? Where are you spending money this year? Any new facilities you're spinning up? Those kinds of things I think will really start to own in on what's really happening.
Yeah. Let's drill down to that a little bit. I mean, I think there's some misconceptions about the umbrella of IoT and the umbrella of the products that are in there, right? Some people might hear that and might go, okay, what is this? A sensor on my propane tank? I'm probably not going to sell anything in that. I don't have any customers like that. We'll go granular into an example here in a second, but give us just a little bit of a high level, right? It's more than sensors, right? It's a lot of things. Walk us through that.
Yeah, so I think first and foremost, we kind of need to demystify IoT, right? I mean, the title alone, Internet of Things, is this massive title. Like, you could really throw anything in there. And I think that's what's cool about it. But ultimately, I think it's important to break down what IoT really is. And this is a simplistic view. I understand that. There's probably some, real IT pros that may be listening to this going, oh, that's not right. But really, if you think about it, you've got three components to make an IoT solution. Okay. So number one, you've got some kind of widget, the thing that's out there in the world, and you're collecting information from it, right? And you've got a sensor or some kind of widget or some kind of, piece of equipment or whatever that is collecting data from the field, something in the field, something. And then it transports it. So that's the second component. Has to take that data from point A and move it to point B. That's the second component, transport. And that can be, wireless, SIM cards, hardline internet, radio. There's a million different ways you can Bluetooth. There's a million different ways you can do the transport. And then the third component is some kind of user interface where we can make sense of that data, right? And a simple example would be, you've got a propane tank, a sensor on there says whether it's full or empty. Okay. So when it gets below a certain point, the sensor sends a piece of information. It transports to some kind of light that says, hey, red light, the propane tank is empty here. And that's a very simple example. Another great example, I think, that really kind of drives it home is think about cameras. Okay. You got security cameras that are out in the field. They're collecting data, video images of what's going on in that environment, then takes those images, transports it to a monitor where I can look at my monitor and view those images and see what's happening. So if you kind of demystify Internet of Things and kind of break it into really what is it, I think that helps a lot of people zero in on what we're talking about here. So that being said, I brought up two very different examples of IoT, and I think it is a very, very broad area. And that's what's really cool about it. I think there's so many different ways you can go with it that sometimes it is easy to kind of get off the rails. One of the things we really try to focus our tech advisors in is, hey, let's focus on the areas you guys can make money on this stuff right now. And so you'll see a lot of the educational content that we're doing and the Ascend events that I'm putting together. One of the first things I talk about is too long didn't read slide where I've got like the 8 things that you can make money at with IoT, right? And so we're trying to do our best to hone partners in on that, but it's a big world there. It's really important to kind of understand what it is. And once you understand that, whatever that information is you want to gather, there's something that can do it for you. And I think that's the overarching sort of message of IoT.
Yeah, I love it. It is this box of Legos, but I really think it is starting to get productized pretty well. And we're gonna have Vince on from Abundant here in an upcoming episode, right? I mean, who would have thought that we'd be doing EV charging infrastructure?
Yeah.
So there's so many ways. I think that stuff comes out when you ask those questions, like you mentioned, of where are you guys spending money? What are the projects coming up? Right? Things that my bucket is wide of the areas that I can help you. So those are good questions in there.
Yeah, and Vince is a great guy to talk to. We just did we've been doing our hit series on Tuesdays, little shameless promotion here. Every Tuesday on our call, the first half is what we call hit, high intensity tech training. And just this week I had Vince on and we talked about energy, right? And the opportunity to make residual income from selling energy. And so you go, how does that tie into telecom? Well, IoT, right? Got all these little energy sensors out there monitoring usage and efficiency and all this stuff. And so that turns into a potential revenue opportunity. We can help our customers collect the information, then we can take that information and help them turn it into cost savings for the business. So I think there's so much you can do with it. It's really a cool space to be in.
Well, yeah, and then my favorite thing, we'll get into this here in the next one, is the deals. What we see a lot of statistically is the deals never end exactly where they started. They tend to kind of multiply like this. So you may start with hey, did you know I can help you from an energy perspective because you're in a deregulated state, which may turn into sensors. It may turn into 4G, 5G. It may turn into, well, geez, you're sending a lot of data. Where is that going? And that turns into a data warehousing and cloud, and it just keeps going and going and going. And so whatever the wedge is, whatever the wedge conversation is, I think there are so many, especially in this area, that you can wedge in that you have in this bucket.
Yeah, no, great point. And I think one of the first things I realized when I came into the channel side of the business is none of these technologies exist in a vacuum, right? So, when you're out there running around slinging circuits for whatever carrier or provider, when you start to have conversations with our tech advisors and all the different things they're in, you realize pretty quickly that your stuff needs to work with a bunch of other stuff to be a truly efficient and effective solution. And I mean, that is so true now today. You're absolutely right. That IoT data that's being collected, it's being transported, right? So that's where you've got wireless internet and all these things that are part of my advanced network role. And then, of course, where's that data going to be stored, right? It's going to some kind of cloud. And then, of course, you got to secure it, right? So then you've got our security. So there's all these things that none of them exist in a vacuum. And I love that about our industry.
So let's dive into one of these examples. Give us a scenario, kind of where you got brought in, what you were told, the problem, the issue, the whatever the situation was, and then ultimately, what did that end out? What did it solve? What did it do for the customer that was different from what they started at?
Yeah, one of the examples I think really I love to talk about, and I've mentioned it a couple of times already, is physical security. So protecting the physical environment is something that has become more and more of an issue for businesses, government, and even, of course, personal residences as well. So securing that environment. And the fact of the matter is that we just cannot, be everywhere at once and watch everything at once. Well, as it turns out, we kind of can now, right? And so we had a school system that we've been working with in one of the largest school systems in the country, and they had issues at their schools. They've got kids vaping. They've got they want to make sure they know when there's weapons coming on site. They've got all of these problems maintaining control of the environment of their schools. So they were struggling with, hey, we just cannot staff enough people to keep an eye on this. Like, we do not have that kind of a budget. Even if we did, there's not that many people out there to do this. There's so many areas to cover. So now the one thing they did have is they had security cameras, right? And they had a budget for security cameras, but they did not have somebody to sit in front of them all day. They just did not have those resources. So fortunately, AI is a great thing, and that sort of user interface, we have a solution that can sit over the top and bring in those camera feeds and tell you whatever you want to be told about that information. So many of them will provide the cameras if you need them, but most of them will work with the existing camera infrastructure as long as they're IP cameras. So we put this in front of the school and we said, okay, well, what do you guys want to know? What do you guys want to see? Okay, well, we want to see if there is a congregation of kids in an area, because usually if you get 5 to 10 kids congregating in an area, they're up to no good. And I was one of those kids at one point in time, so I certainly can attest to that. So we want to know. We want to be alerted if there's a bunch of kids congregating in an area. Great, no problem. You got this AI box that sits there watching those cameras 24/7, 7 days a week, all the time. And when there's 5 kids that send in that 5 or more kids in that area, sends an alert to a resource officer that says, hey, a bunch of kids congregating in this hallway, go check it out. Vape detection is another thing, right? Those AI boxes can bring in vape detection from a restroom or whatever. Obviously, you can't put cameras in there, so there's other things you got to do. Weapon detection. If somebody comes onto the property with a weapon, we want to know. We want to be able to detect it. So the school had all these use cases, certain things they wanted to look for. And we were able to put them in front of one of our suppliers. In this case, it was Claro. And they did a really good job of working with the school and saying, okay, what do you guys want to know? What do you guys not care about? They had a very defined list of use cases, and we put that together, and they loved it. And we sold that. And we've got, a number of other school districts that are looking at it for the exact same reason. So that, I think, is a really, really cool concept. And what I love about that, it's universal, right? Every business needs it. There are no businesses that don't have an interest in keeping track of their physical environment. So one of the IoT solutions that can apply to any industry vertical. I think that's great.
Love it. Awesome example, and plenty more where that came from. Final couple thoughts here as we get to the end of this. All right, I'm a partner. You got me excited about this. I'm comfortable in this. I haven't sold it before. Maybe I'm ready to kind of jump into it now and learn a little more. What do you think the partners? What do you want them to be talking about? What is that talk track? Right, I'm ready to go talk to my 5 customers in my base or my 5 prospects. I think you alluded to some of this earlier, but maybe let's bring that home on the questions, the talk track. Let's dial that in.
Yeah, no, I think, I did touch on this earlier, and I think it's just really important to find out what's going on in the business, right? We talk a lot about business problems, right? And how do we solve for business problems? I think, a good idea to have an understanding of sort of what business problems could be. And in my Ascend events, I break it into 3 categories. And certainly there's many more that you could go down, but I think these 3 categories. So you're looking for something that's costing the business money, right? An overrun on costs or something they want to get control of, or loss prevention or whatever. Number 2, you're looking for something that's preventing the business from making money. Okay. So lack of resources, lack of expertise, lack of, information about a market or a product or a technology. So that's number 2. And then number 3, maybe something that's putting the business at risk. And I think right there, you've got things like cybersecurity that can fall into that category, or physical security, like I talked about earlier. So those are just 3 examples of business problems that are fairly universal. And just kind of ask those, hey, what's going on? Like, what are you guys spending more on than you think you should be right now? and don't stick to just IT, because a lot of times it's not going to be there. Any concerns with, things that are preventing you guys from making money? We don't have enough of X, or we don't have enough of, we don't know where our trucks are, or whatever. It's amazing the things that'll come up that when you ask those questions. And I think, when you think about business problems, those are just three. There's several other examples, of course, you can have, but I love those three because they tend to be fairly universal across all businesses. So that's a great place to start.
Love it. Final thought here. So your advice for the actual end businesses that are out there considering moving somewhere in an IoT direction, just put a bow maybe on some of these pitfalls to avoid, or key considerations, so we make sure this transition is smooth.
Yeah, no, I think, as a business, when you start to think of the art of the possible, that can be very overwhelming, right? Like there's so many different things you can do with IoT. And I really talk to our tech advisors about this as well. Like, this is really kind of that shiny object syndrome, like squirrel, there's an opportunity, or there's a new cool technology. I think we really want to focus on this aspect of proof of value versus proof of concept, right? Like, what is the problem we're trying to solve here? What is the outcome that we want? And if we're talking as businesses or as tech advisors, that's really what we want to zero in on. What are we trying to accomplish here? What's the value of that? If we do accomplish that, what is the value of it? Let's define that. Let's get our arms around that. And then the rest tends to fall in place. So, are we a solution in search of a problem, or are we a problem in search of a solution, right? And I think looking at it in those two different ways, I think we really want to be looking at the problem first, and then we can find a solution for it. I mean, there's so many great technologies out there. Maybe an IoT solution, may not, right? But there's always something that's there to look at.
Awesome. Well, that wraps us up, my man. And I think you reminded everybody, if they haven't gone and checked out the HIT series, go check it out. If they haven't been to one of Graeme's Ascends, go check it out. A lot of great content out there. You're doing a great job, and I really appreciate you coming on, man.
Yeah, thanks. Look forward to being a guest again sometime soon.
Love it. Well, everybody, that wraps us up for today. Graeme Scott, VP of Mobility and Advanced Networking over here at Telarus. And don't forget, go subscribe wherever you're on, Spotify, Apple Music. This has been Meeting the Innovators, Shaping Tomorrow's World. I'm your host, Josh Lopresto.
Next Level BizTech has been a production of Telarus Studio 19. Please visit Telarus.com for more information.